Well, I'm happy to introduce Chris Lopez from Tanium. He's going to be our, final scheduled talk of the day, and I think it's a really good one because it's going to tie in a lot of the things that we've heard other speakers talk about, right? And again, it's about what we're delivering. It's our intelligence products. So, with that, Chris, why don't you take it away?
Awesome. Can you hear me? Just making sure. Like one last time.
Loud and clear.
Perfect. All right. So let's get started. Will they read my reports? Let's hope, right? That's all we can do. So my name is Christopher Lopez. I was already introduced, but I've been a SOC analyst for, 4 or 5 years now. Wow, the time is flying. And I am of the mind that a really effective SOC has some form of threat intelligence, factored in, right? And I started writing reports very early in my career, and I've messed up a lot of them. I haven't done very good with many of the reports, but over time, the feedback that I received from key people in my career that I've leaned on have really helped me get better at this. This is something that we all just work on to improve. So I'm going to try to share some of those stories and some of those tips that I've received over time. And let's just jump in. So the agenda, how to measure value. Now that's a very difficult topic to talk about, but we're going to try. Why to write a report, when not to write a report. That's almost as important as writing one. Potential inputs, understanding your audience, what I consider to be the 3 C's, the structure, and your delivery method. Something here that's really important is this presentation is a little bit small, right? I'm trying to stay as concise as possible because I have a problem with being concise. And that's something we're going to talk about here because it's super important when you're writing reports, especially when you understand your audience, right? So how to measure value. We're going to spend a few moments here talking about expectations. So I have failed at this before. I didn't understand the expectations around what I was trying to deliver, what kind of report I was trying to write. And a perfect example of that was, early on in my career, I got really interested in a topic that I thought everyone would want to know about, right? Like, oh, this is really interesting threat. I'm not sure if it affects us, but I just think it's interesting enough. I'm going to write it up and spend all day on this because I think it's interesting. But I did not adhere to the expectations that I should put into a report. And I just sent it up because I thought it was great and it wasn't, right? So this should be predetermined. What I mean by that is understand with your leadership what they expect from reports if you're going to be writing reports, right? And something that I've talked about before in another presentation about like what you write as an analyst, your reports are an expression of your value, right? So all the work that you do and all the time you spend researching something, sometimes it only reflects through what you write, right? So they don't really see all the time that you put into things. They see the end result, and that end result needs to align with the expectations. So that's one way of measuring value, and that's very specific to the organization that you work with. So if this is not something already that has been discussed, definitely have those difficult conversations to understand the expectations. All right. Albert Einstein said it great regarding value. I just like putting quotes in here because it makes me feel fancy. Why not? So try not to become a man or person in 2020 of success, but rather to become a man or person of value. I think he said it perfectly. All right. So why should you write a report? Number one, it might just be your job requirement, right? It might just be something that in your job you're going to have to do, right? It's something that is expected of you. Again, back to the expectations and leadership expectations, right? We're going to say that word a few more times here. It's okay. They may want this from you, right? So that's another reason why you would want to write a report. Another one would be providing awareness. Now, this can be awareness to internal customers, right? Which is your user base. And this can be providing awareness to external customers. This can be people that your company has a relationship with, and that's just an awareness type report. Another one that's really important here is equipping management with data. So as a SOC analyst, I think it's super important to understand like what it is that we're trying to do, right? And one of the things that I feel I'm trying to do is give my leadership the facts that they need to make those really important decisions, right? So that needs to be reflected through my report or my investigation notes that I write. And that's just something to keep in mind when you want to ask yourself, is this worthy of me writing a report? You may need to do that to give them the tools they need to make those difficult decisions, and they being your management. When not to write a report. This is even more difficult because I have found myself in many situations where I write a report unnecessarily. And again, like I said before, I'll send it up because I think it's what I should do. And this could have probably been handled better with a phone call, or it could have been an IM even. It could have been something, hey, this is really interesting. What do you think about it? And this is definitely where you should lean on your peers. Something that I've really benefited from in my career, starting out in InfoSec, not really knowing anything about security, I benefited a lot from like leaning on people to guide me, and learning how to speak about whether or not you should write a report is really important, because you may hear what you need to hear, which is, you know what, maybe you should save this one. Maybe this is not worthy of like that time you're going to spend. Again, is there an expectation of you to write a report about a specific topic? That's always really important to ask yourself when you're trying to consider if you should write something, because writing takes time. So why not spend the time on something else if it's not necessary? Okay, so inputs. A lot of our field is about inputs and outputs, right? So potential inputs that come in that would warrant a report after we have determined that a report is a good way to go, and the output is the report itself, right? So these can be a couple things, right? We see on the news now a lot of things going on, a lot of interesting threats and compromises. Those things are definitely worthy inputs to write a report. It can be a threat hunt, for example, that you got some information from some of these tactics and techniques that are super interesting to you, and you're looking in your environment, you find something interesting, or you don't, which is also a good thing to know about. You can write a report around that. Or something that I spend a lot of time doing is writing reports based on investigation notes, since my job primarily is all about investigating things and seeing what happens in a specific detection that fired, for example, as a SOC analyst. So that to me is an input to write a report. Okay. Now this is critical. I spent a lot of time early on writing reports, and I remember one report that I tried really hard to show some technical prowess, right? I tried to demonstrate that I knew what I was talking about. And that's where I had to learn the hard way that you really need to understand your audience, and you need to understand when and where to put certain types of content into your report, your document. It's critical. One thing to really keep in mind, especially when you're creating reports that you're going to share with leadership, again, to make those decisions or to provide awareness, is that people are really busy, right? They don't want to read a 10-page report, unfortunately. Maybe they do, I don't know, but usually people are busy, and that's just something to really keep in mind. And will they even want to read your report? Is it relevant to what is happening right now in the company, for example, or it's happening right now in the InfoSec landscape? Is it relevant, right? Is it something that's going to really pique interest? And that is when you start trying to understand and ask yourself this question of, who is my audience? I've made the mistake in the past of writing as if I was going to share this with my peers, or I was writing it as I was going to share it to like a mentee or someone that's like, hey, look how cool this is, instead of, hey, this is why this is important and impactful to the organization. So it's really important to, again, ask yourself, is this for my leadership? Is this for a different department? Because that's also interesting when it comes to what are you sharing with a different department, right? Especially if you're in a SOC and you're, dealing with investigating specific things and suspicious activity with user accounts. You may not want to share everything that you're monitoring, for example, and what it is that the SOC is doing, from a SOC perspective. So understanding if this is going to a different department is really critical. And of course, if it's going out to external customers, what can you and can you not share? That's really important. Understanding your audience is something I still have difficulty with, but definitely ask yourself that while you start getting into the writing process. Okay, so I mentioned being concise, something that has been drilled into me many times, and it's a good thing. I remember one report that I wrote where I didn't understand how important it is to be concise, and I got really into my first paragraph, and it was, I don't know, maybe 10 sentences long, completely unnecessary, too much stuff in it. And it really just confused everybody. But to me, it sounded fantastic, which is interesting, but that's how that happens. And we can be a little biased when we write. And these are the 3 C's, and one of them is being concise. The other one is being clear. So that had to do with me, honestly, writing for myself, not writing for the audience that I was trying to write this report for. Leave nothing to interpretation. Don't, just write things that are super vague, because that's not going to help, provide any kind of awareness, or it's not going to help the audience really understand what it is that they're reading this for. Again, people are busy. They want to know what's happening as quickly as possible. So we touched on being concise, right? Use very few words, or use the most impactful words to convey the message as upfront as you possibly can. And as you can see, I like to ramble, so still working on that one. Another one is, this one's bitten me too. I remember being correct, which means like fact checking, right? Before presenting data to support claims, right? Don't provide an assumption. That's a bad one. That's not a good place to put yourself in when you're doing, you're trying to provide some data. Providing an assumption is not good. And just check your facts. Check to make sure that what you're writing makes sense. I remember I was writing an investigation one time, and I wrote in there that there was no evidence of malicious activity occurring on the machine or something along those lines. And the problem was I didn't expand my scope enough in that investigation, and there was evidence. It's just that I didn't find it. That was on me, okay? So that was not being correct. I did not write that the way that it should have been written. I should have probably spent a little bit more time on that, and that doesn't look good in a report. So the 3 C's, very important: clear, concise, and correct. Okay, so we're gonna talk about the report structure. There's one thing missing here. I left it out because it's just the body of the email. Of the report that you're writing. It could be an email. Who knows what you're gonna deliver this with. So the BLUF, which has been talked about before, very important, something that I had to learn the hard way many times. Technical summary, appendices, I believe that's how you say it. I always get that mixed up. And providing visuals, which is always great. So the BLUF. I've heard that it's been talked about before. This is something that is super important, something that I learned very early on. Really provide your audience with everything they need in the very top of the page, or the very top of the email, first paragraph if possible. Most important thing that you can do. The next point here, writing it last, was something I learned after the fact. I think this is really important, because your BLUF may change as you keep writing. And I always found myself changing my BLUF. And what I ended up doing was, instead of writing it first, because I thought I had everything all put together in the beginning, I realized I didn't. Usually I would write it last. I'll make it so that I can pick out everything that's most important to me, and provide that in the BLUF after I wrote everything else down. So give your audience everything they want up front. Make it so that within the first 5 minutes, because of course, as we've said, people are busy. People have 5 minutes. Make sure that in 5 minutes, they have everything that they need in order to make a decision even, right? And of course, everyone's busy. So are we. So here goes an example. I'm not gonna read all this. This is just an example of a paragraph in which I provide timestamps, which I think are really important. I provide, this is just like the first paragraph in a report or in an email, depending on your delivery method. I provide not just that something happened on a machine, and this is of course like from a SOC perspective. I also provide the username. I provide key details that will help somebody, whomever the audience is, understand what's going on with this specific thing that they're reading. So that's just an example. And of course, an action that was taken at the end or something in the beginning, depending on if we needed to do something with this machine or what was the end result of this investigation, again, from like a SOC perspective. Okay, so the technical summary. This is where you get to have a lot of fun, right? If you're super technical and you like to really shine when it comes to your understanding of something technically, which I think is awesome, have fun with it, right? Make it a summary, try to keep it condensed, but you can be as technical as you want. This is for the audience to be able to read more if they want to be able to expand their knowledge about this if they need to. To me, this is more supplemental than anything. This can come before or after the body. I mean, that depends on like how, the expectations of how reports should be done in your organization, which really ties back to really establishing a good report template. I didn't put it in here, but that's something really key with your leadership. Create a template if you don't already have one so that everyone is on the same page. And, this is just so that you can provide a summary of everything technical for the audience to understand more if they want to. Okay. Appendices, I think I'm saying it right. This is another way of adding more to your report without having to disrupt the flow of your report. So let's say if you have like extra content or pictures, which are always great, or graphs, which work really well. Management loves graphs and figures and all that stuff. That's fantastic. Do it. This is where you put it, usually at the end of the report, so it doesn't interfere with the writing flow that you're trying to, establish. And of course, it can be visual. We like pictures, so put it in there and just reference them in your write-up, like in the body of your email. Visuals. All right, so this slide stands out. There's a reason for it. It's because you need to be really careful with making your visuals not distract from the report. You don't want it to like completely surprise somebody. That's something that I failed at. I saw something really interesting. And for example, let's say that I saw execution of something really bad in a report or in an investigation that I was writing. And I put a picture of the command line right there. Bam, that's what I want. Command line prompt and all this gibberish, right? That can detract and that can distract from the report itself. So just be aware of what kind of visuals you're putting into your report. And of course, people like pictures, and graphs can be a lot of fun. And that's always really good to put into your reports. But just be mindful of what visuals can take away from the report. Okay, so the delivery method. We're going to talk about expectations one more time here. Write your report with the expectation that it will be referenced. This was something that I didn't consider many times. Those things that you write and are shared in some kind of doc or some kind of, I don't know, whatever shared folder you guys have in your, in your jobs. Just make sure that you write it with expectation that your management or somebody's going to be like, hey, remember that document or remember that report that Chris wrote? And they'll pull it back up to, reference something or to talk about something. So write it with that expectation. And also it could be an email. So everything applies the same way, copy paste into an email, make sure your formatting is right. But it's just something to keep in mind. And it could also lead to a presentation. So that's where I try to make sure that my reports, I take out key things from the BLUF and make that all about like what it is that I'm going to cover in a presentation. Just the delivery method is important so you understand like how it is that this is going to be written and for what expectation. Okay, so I know I was really fast. I wanted to make sure that this stays as concise as possible, trying to work on that. So it's all about measuring value and understanding your value, within your organization. Have those conversations, even though they're difficult, with your leadership. Understand what it is that they want from you. Your values, it comes through from your reports as an analyst. So make sure that that's ironed out. Is a report really needed? Really ask yourself that question, because you don't want to spend a lot of time on an unnecessary report if it's not something that's even expected in the first place. We've talked about expectations. I promise it's the last time I'm going to say it here. And then the structure we went over at BLUF, technical summary, the visuals, appendices, and my favorite part of all this is the 3 C's. Very, very easy to remember. And of course, focusing on your delivery method. So resources, I think these are really important. Lenny has incredible documentation about this stuff. It's great. Writing tips and writing better threat reports. I'm assuming he may have been referenced already. I haven't been able to catch a lot of these. I've been working a lot, but that's okay. One of the books that really was surprising to me that I didn't see before was this James S. Mayer, Communicating with Intelligence. Is fantastic. I can't believe that it's that good. It was actually in a graduate course, which was surprising because it's a textbook, but it was good. And of course, Chris Sanders, Effective Security Writing, I believe is pretty cheap and it's awesome. And it really helps from like a SOC perspective. And I believe that's it.